Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 9th of January 2023, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. We're delighted to be joined by David Scott, bringing us northern exposure from north of the border, and Mark Anderson reporting from the United States. Hey, thank you for that. I think it's over to David now, which is possibly where the whole thing goes.
Well, we're now going to talk about the Melbourne experiment, which was on the people of Melbourne. We've got here some information from Monash University in Australia, and they're talking about the Cities for People. The Melbourne experiment is a landmark interdisciplinary research collaboration studying the effects of COVID-19 on the functions of a city. They actually mean studying the effects of the COVID-19 policies on the functions of the city, and an international model for post-COVID-19 urban recovery and renewal. So this is going to go international. Message here from their Senior Vice President, Mark Parlange. The global shutdown to control COVID-19, so he knows what it's about the shutdown, is a historic disruption to urban life. We can observe activities that are fundamental to the idea of a city being brought to a stop. I wonder why anyone would want to, but okay. The positive and negative impacts on different groups and how and whether they return as restrictions are gradually lifted. So they are now viewing the entire COVID-19 lockdown as a giant experiment to see how we all responded. What happens when you shut down a city? And who's at the back of this? It is, of course, the United Nations. So we see here a United Nations article. COVID-19, sustainable development, it's all about sustainable development, and the Melbourne experiment. Now they quote Juan Romo of Carlos III's University in Madrid, who said, we have the opportunity to learn from this pandemic, and universities are uniquely situated and resourced to lead transformative conversations, not repenting of what they've done to the population. Note, they're going to lead conversations that are going to transform the population. There is only one direction of travel being considered. So we come now to the report itself. We have here a slide that's got the cover of the report on it, the Melbourne Experiment report. And they've identified 17 lessons, because 16 is not enough. And the main themes, physical and mental health and well-being, which you can't define. Human behaviour, it's always about human behaviour. Economic impact, of course. Future city, planning and urban renewal. This is coming to the fore. This is your 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute city ideas that are propagating all through Western society now. So planning is going to be key. Social impacts, environmental impacts, and digital technology. So they learned three broad lessons, and here they are. Number one, the need to expand funding, well, we want more money, yes, and commit adequate resources for mental health care and gender-specific planning. Now, I'm not absolutely sure what their angle is on gender-specific planning, but they were noting there was a lot more domestic violence when everyone was contained in a giant prison cell. They are here, I think, admitting that, well, we've heard from our audience that this has been an attack on people's minds. This has been an attack on people's sanity. And they are kind of admitting, yes, we need to do something about that next time. Then they then have the need to encourage and expand positive behaviours established during the pandemic. So the pandemic was good. You know, we need to build on this. This includes employment flexibility, reduction in the use of cars. Cars represent freedom. We don't like cars, they're bad. Utilisation of technology to reduce social inequalities and increase access to social supports. Not actually sure what that means in practice. And then the need for reflexive and innovative planning and policy design that incorporates the voices of experts and communities and relies on evidence. Now, this is an interesting one. So we've got innovative planning and policy design. So this is how we're going to shape the cities of the future. Right? What comes first is the voices of the experts. The communities are allowed a voice, but it must rely on evidence. It doesn't rely on democracy. It doesn't rely on liberty or individual choice. It relies on evidence. Who is providing the evidence? Well, the state and the experts. So what we're talking about here is central planning against the will of the people, exactly what was seen in Oxford. Just to dive in a little bit deeper, it's a big report. I've picked out a couple of themes here. Theme 1 on physical and mental health and well-being. So they're wanting more funding for wastewater-based epidemiology. That's interesting. And again, a concentration on mental health. And they're mentioning women's safety and violence during the lockdown. Theme 2, human behaviour. Create conditions for a citywide shift back to public transport use. Now, create conditions means coerce. Let's be quite clear about that. And alternative modes of transport. And 2, consider the actual behaviours post-COVID-19 urban recovery and renewal strategies are intended to affect. Let this guide what policies are put in place. So this is the experiment, right? They're watching how people's behaviour is actually changing, learning from it, and then putting policies in place to control, change, and manipulate that behaviour. So this is what we've been talking about for many years, but we're now seeing it being studied on a citywide scale and applied globally.
And David, I think we need to add to that, of course, it's the British government's behavioural insights team that's been instrumental in a lot of this, because they've gone from applying this fear policy on the UK public to moving overseas. Australia was one of the early places that they went alongside the States, and then it's gone global from there. So we know that a lot of the psychological base for what's happening appears to have started out, at least in the UK, with support from the US.
Yes, indeed, that's the case. The behavioural insights team, they were the innovators, they were first, and they've been selling this technology and trumpeting how wonderful it is all around the world, especially to friendly countries like Australia and America.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well,